Why your videos don't look like a Hollywood movie. Let's talk about it. Welcome back once again for another video. YouTubers love to make their cinematic sequences look like a Hollywood movie. This is because Hollywood movies are very high on contrast and saturation and heavily color graded that it looks really nice. So YouTubers love to mimic that cinematic look, but they can only mimic that look. They can't really duplicate it, if that makes any sense. So you're making your cinematic sequence, you nailed the lighting, you shot in 24 frames per second, you shot in a log profile, you color correct it, you color grade it, you add some crop to the top and the bottom, you even add a little bit of slow motion in the mix, and it looks really good, but it just doesn't quite look exactly like a Hollywood movie. Now, why is that? Let's dive into it. Number 1, dynamic range. Dynamic range is a term that describes the ratio between the brightest and the darkest parts of an image measured in stops. The more stops a camera has, the higher dynamic range it can achieve. This means that they can retain more detail in both the brightest and darkest part of an image. Most consumer and prosumer cameras like DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have only around 11 stops of dynamic range, whereas a RED camera, which is a cinema camera, has 16.5 stops. Make no mistakes, the human eye has 20 stops. Cameras are simply incapable of simultaneously capturing the same amount of detail in the shadows and highlights that our eyes are able to. With the typical cameras that we use, we can only expose for the shadows or the highlights. We can never really do both. Even with a log profile, it still has its limitations. Cinema cameras have higher dynamic range ability, which is why you can never really see blown out highlights in the windows or the sky. Even though they're exposing for the shadows, they still retain a lot of detail in the highlights. Number 2, color spaces. Color spaces have 3 primary values: hue, which is the color itself; saturation, which is the intensity of the color; and lightness, which is the color's brightness or darkness. So color space is a standard that determines how much of the full spectrum of color and luminance values can be captured by a device like a camera and displayed on a device like a screen. A normal camera uses the color space called Rec 709. Rec 709 is pretty standard in most devices, and Rec 709 can only record 36% of the physiologically perceived colors in human vision. The vast majority of display devices and entry-level cameras and even prosumer hybrid photo-video cameras use Rec 709 as their color space. The color space in cinema cameras are simply larger and wider. They capture more shades of red, more shades of green, more shades of blue, more shades of every color in the spectrum, which makes the footage look much more cinematic or much more movie-like. Number 3, gamma curves. Now, gamma curves is a really complicated subject. I'm not even sure if I can actually explain it to you guys, but I'll try. Gamma curves is an operation used to encode, store, and decode color and luminance information in video and still images. Gamma curves determine how an image looks in terms of contrast and saturation. Different color spaces have different gamma curves. Gamma curves can either be linear or non-linear in nature. Non-linear gamma curves will have more information retained in its highlights and shadows, and such footage is also known as a logarithmic profile, or for short, log profile. So when you see people using a log profile, they're simply switching from a linear curve to a non-linear curve. And a non-linear curve is simply more flexible to edit. So the gamma curves produced by a cinema camera has way more flexibility. Number 4, bit depth. Cameras capture footage as digital files, and these files are comprised of pieces of data called bits. So bit depth is actually the number of bits of data used to record the 3 different color channels, red, green, and blue, for every pixel in an image. The most common bit depth in video is 8-bit. This includes most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras and point and shoots, and even action cams like GoPros and stuff like that. Cinema cameras record at 10-bit or 12-bit. That's a lot of bits, which is also one of the reasons why cinema cameras are really expensive. And lastly, number 5, color sampling. Digital video is stored by separating luma, which is light, and chroma, which is color. And both of these components contain a lot of information. So much so that they need to compress some of these components down in order to reduce the amount of information that needs to be transmitted. This compression involves reducing the resolution of the chroma components in respect to the resolution of the luma components. And it's this compression process is what they call color sampling. So color sampling, along with dynamic range, color space, gamma curve, and bit depth will all how far any video clip will cooperate with you when you get into post and you're trying to color correct and color grade. So just know that it's not entirely your fault that you can't get your videos to look like a movie. Hollywood cinematographers are most likely shooting uncompressed 12-bit RAW files in a log profile in a much wider color space and with at least 5 more stops of dynamic range. So naturally their videos are gonna just look incredible. But there is hope. These mind-boggling tech in pro-level cinema cameras always trickles down to the lower tiers eventually. In fact, it's already happening. Most mirrorless cameras these days are able to support log profiles and 10-bit color recording. It's just a matter of time before most of the other features become available to us. So keep on making those cinematic B-rolls and cinematic sequences, but most importantly, keep on making more videos. With that, I'm gonna end this video right here. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. New videos every week until we meet again in the next one. Live it, vlog it, the movement is real. Peace.